Israel's latest ambition into space came down with a crash in an intended moon landing earlier this year. Bereshit, an unmanned Israeli spacecraft, crashed during an attempt to land on the moon due to a technical glitch, at least according to SpaceIL, the Israeli nonprofit behind the mission. The unmanned robotic lander suffered periodic engine and communications failures during the 21 minutes of the landing sequence. The personnel involved in the mission say that the spacecraft crashed onto the moon on April 11 after a series of technical failures during its final descent.
Finished an initial look at our telemetry data. It seems that the failure in our inertial measurement unit caused a chain of events in the spacecraft avionics, which cut off the engines and caused us to lose the mission.
The mishap occurred in front of a packed audience that included Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and was broadcast live on national television. The $100 million mission had been financed largely by Israeli billionaire Morris Khan and a handful of other investors.
We didn't make it, but we definitely tried. And I think that the achievement of getting to where we got is really tremendous.
The failure was a disappointing one, ending a 6.5 million kilometer lunar voyage that was designed to conserve fuel and reduce price. The mission was designed and planned by the Israeli nonprofit SpaceIL and state-owned Israeli aerospace industries. Israel, however, had to use the US-based SpaceX's Falcon rocket to hitch a ride for its spacecraft to the moon. Many in the industry believe that Israel rushed to get the spacecraft to the moon as the regime there was preparing for elections.
Israel is seeking to convey the impression that it's scientifically and technically on a par with the other nations who have made a soft landing on the moon, which of course are the great nations of the world. This was very much a political move by Bibi to strengthen his re-election prospects, and with a heightened sense of the pride of the people of Israel, but where the technical failure to make a soft landing, which led instead to a collision of the spacecraft with the moon, of course obviously put a dent in the prospects.
Israel's Bereshit mission to the moon is all political. SpaceIL, one of the companies behind Bereshit, says its mission's aim was to inspire Israelis to pursue STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math careers. However, new revelations show otherwise. In fact, not only was Israel's failed mission to the moon political, it was also military. This is because SpaceIL, which sells itself as a non-profit, had teamed up with Israel Aerospace Industries, a for-profit company which builds military weapons and equipment for the Israeli military. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made the mission's political aspirations pretty clear.
גדול לישראל, אבל צעד ענק לטכנולוגיה הישראלית. אני אמרתי לפני כמה שעות שמדינת ישראל היא כוח עולמי עולה. עולה, ועולה, עד הירח. זה מראה למה אנחנו מסוגלים. אנחנו מדינה קטנה ענקית. ומה שיש פה זה רק עדות להתחלה. זו רק ההתחלה. אז אני מקווה שאתם כבר מתכננים את החללית למאדים. החללית המאוישת או הלא מאוישת זה פחות חשוב, אבל...
No doubt the Israelis are doing this using other people's money. They have been quite brilliant at exploiting the United States for fabulous sums of money over decades and decades now, even generations. And indeed, it's profoundly disturbing because, according to United States foreign aid guidelines, the American government is not lawfully allowed to make any foreign aid contributions to any state with undeclared weapons of mass destruction. It's well known that Israel have undeclared stockpiles of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, and therefore U.S. foreign aid is not being legally provided to Israel. But it's indicative of the clout of the Israeli lobby in the United States and of the mainstream media, which is very heavily infiltrated by dual U.S.-Israeli citizens.
The project was not all 100% made in Israel. In fact, the project began as part of the Google Lunar X Prize, which in 2010 offered $30 million in awards to scientists and entrepreneurs to come up with relatively low-cost moon missions. Although the Google Prize expired in March without a winner, Israel's team insisted to push forward. The American state-owned NASA Space Agency also teamed up with the Israeli mission via installing a small laser retroflector aboard the lander to test its potential as a navigation tool. Also, NASA made its deep space network available to transmit data for the mission. NASA has not disclosed how much financial help its efforts in the mission costed and whether or not that money has come from U.S. taxpayers.
American space program and the Israeli as well are really covers for the development of military weapons and technology that are intended to give those nations an edge in dealing with their competitors. We have seen, of course, a whole host of issues of events where Israel has utilized the United States to benefit Israel.
Had Israel succeeded in landing the spacecraft on the moon, it would have been the fourth in the world to land a spacecraft there. Some issues started well before the launch, including customs clearance. In fact, the liftoff was delayed for 3 months because of disagreements over Trump's border wall, shuttered the American government for 35 days. If Bereshit hadn't arrived in America in time to be assembled for the SpaceX launch, the entire project would have fallen apart.
When you combine the political, economic, military aspects here, it cannot be discounted. But nevertheless, by and large, I regard this effort as been essentially political theater, a stunt to aid Benjamin Netanyahu to become a prime minister of Israel for the 5th time, at which, of course, he has been successful in spite of the failure of the spacecraft to actually succeed in making a soft landing. Well, the Israelis have an open spigot from the United States as far as sources of funding are concerned, but what's most interesting about this, I believe, is that we have an example of political theater by Israel using a private company in an effort to boost the political prospects of Bibi Netanyahu facing, stiff competition and under indictment, running for his 5th term as prime minister.
It seems that the U.S.'s role in Israel's space program is not to be underestimated. Tel Aviv's politically motivated space ambition failed in its last moments, but only a handful of observers realize the dangers of such political maneuvers to the region and to the rest of the world when considering its military nature.